Hey friends, Ari Koinuma here. I hope you guys are doing well and thanks for tuning in. Today I wanted to share with you my thoughts on different kinds of guitars and what music they might be suited for. So this is mainly for those of you who are thinking about starting a guitar or picking up a guitar and kind of going, well, there are so many different guitars out there, where do I begin? And so I thought that I would just sort of talk you through just major kinds of guitars and what kind of sounds they make so that you can kind of navigate your way to the right kind of guitar that can get you the kind of sounds and is well suited for the kind of music that you want to play. So I'll start with this one. This is a steel string acoustic guitar. Generally speaking, I think when people think of, yeah, I want to learn how to play the guitar, they're probably thinking of this kind of guitar. So as the name suggests, the strings are made of steel, or at least steel core, and it can be played with a pick or without. It has this clean, crisp sound that can get kind of loud if you strum hard. The thing I would say about steel string acoustic guitar is actually, ironically speaking, this is probably one of the harder guitars to play. The steel strings are generally fairly hard to press down, and you're gonna need a good calluses and good finger strings that you want to develop while you're playing. Like everybody's nemesis, the F chord, right? I mean, I've been playing for many years, but yeah, it's very hard to play this chord cleanly. A lot of times it sounds like this because you just don't have the strength. So you wanna have patience in the beginning. It's gonna hurt your fingertips a little bit, but once you develop the strings, then actually playing the other kinds of guitars will be easier. But otherwise, this kind of guitar is very well suited for singer-songwriter stuff, folk music, some rock, country, blues, that kind of thing. Just a good general-purpose guitar, and for strumming, it can keep up with a lot of different instruments because it can get very loud. But if you are playing mostly finger style, then it doesn't get super loud. The other thing is, if you're wanting to play kinds of solos, a lot of the acoustic guitars are not super easy to play again up here. So I think this one is great for those of you who are thinking about, again, strumming along to some songs and perhaps singing while doing it, kind of thing. The neck is generally fairly narrow, so it's fairly easy to reach for the notes. But it's just that the strings are fairly hard to press down, so be patient, okay? You can do it. I mean, anybody will be able to do it. It is a bit challenging at the very beginning. The next kind of guitar is this. This is also an acoustic guitar, meaning that you don't have to plug it in to play, obviously. But this is a nylon string acoustic guitar, and sometimes called classical guitar. Although there are some acoustic nylon string guitars that are not necessarily classical guitars, but nylon string guitars are generally played with fingers, although there's nothing wrong with playing with a pick. So it has a very intimate sound. It is not as loud as steel string guitars. Depending on what kind of lessons you might take, they might tell you to hold it differently. Like official way of classical guitar is to actually hold it in your, assuming you're right-handed, on your left leg, and have a footstool underneath so that you can raise it a little bit like this and hold it kind of like this. And this way of holding it has the benefit of having the fingers kind of perpendicular to the strings like this, which is really easy, and then it's really natural to kind of be able to reach chords or the pinky sort of reach the up here in the neck, especially with the low strings. Yeah, if you're holding it like this, obviously you kind of have to kind of go like this, right? to do that same thing, and it's a lot easier. But the downside of holding it like this is that you have to kind of raise your hand if you're playing chord, mostly chords up here. So, you're having to put your hand up here instead of down here, which is less relaxing. This kind of guitar is used for classical guitars and again finger picking. You can make folk music, or sometimes you can make it play like jazz or Latin kind of music with this kind of guitar. Flamenco also uses nylon strings, and it has just a nice mellow sound. It's a lot more relaxing, and it's not as loud and challenging as steel string acoustic guitars. The neck is generally wider and bigger, so if you have small hands it might be a little bit harder to reach, but the nylon strings are generally a lot easier to press down and get a good tone than a steel string. The thing about nylon string guitars is that you can definitely play with a pick, but it doesn't give you that steel string crisp, clear, bright, that strumming sound, right? It just sounds less articulate. So you can definitely do it. There's nothing wrong with that, and some people really do play a nylon string guitar with a pick and strum it like they do with the other guitar. Just generally speaking, that's not people typically do, but it can be done. Okay, now switching over to electric. Instead of talking about many different kinds of electric guitar, the thing that I want to sort of have you pay attention to is the pickups. So these are what we call single coil pickups, and as you can see there's a single row of magnets that are under the strings. And single coil pickups are the original kind of pickups that the originator of electric guitars, Fender, made. And so they're the older kind, and they have this brighter, thinner sound. So I have a kind of clangy sounding amp right now, but I switched to a different position. So the thing about electric guitars is that they typically come with more than one pickup, and you have these selectors that get you different sounds. But the point still remains, the single coil pickups tend to sound brighter, so they are better suited for chord work, strumming again, whether it's finger picked or with a pick. So if you want to play in a band, then single coil and then strum chords, then the single coil will have the sort of the brightness and the articulation to make the chords come out, and it's a little bit closer sounding to acoustic guitar than the other kind of guitar with the other kind of pickup that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. The thing about electric guitars is that obviously they're a lot easier to play than acoustic guitar because the guitar is not tasked with creating loud enough sound. You have to plug it into an amp to create the sound, and so it's helpful to think of electric guitar as an instrument with an amp. It's electric guitar and amp that will comprise one instrument. So what kind of music is it good for? So this single coil equipped guitars are used in like country, kind of in like a more folky, jungly rock songs. A lot of the frontman type who strum and sing tend to use single coil pickup guitars again because these single coil pickups, the chords come through a little clearer. Because these were the first kinds of pickups, they tend to be noisy, and so if you have music with a lot of distortion on it, that can be really noisy. Although it can be done, and there are also more sort of reduced noise kind of pickups in this form factor as well. But generally speaking, these are thinner and brighter sounding than the counterparts that I'm going to tell you, the humbucker guitars. If the type of music it's suited for is where you play a lot of chords and not a lot of single note stuff. Okay, so finally we get to the humbucker equipped guitar. And humbuckers, it is kind of confusing name. The reason why it's called humbucker is because those single coils with the single row of coils tend to hum. So they came up with the idea that if you had two rows side by side and there is a sort of a magnetics going on here in here that will sort of cancel the hum out. And then that's why it's called humbuckers, so instead of calling it dual coil as opposed to single coil pickup. The byproduct of having two coils, and these are actually unusual looking humbuckers because it's a special kind of humbucker, but generally speaking you might just see two rows worth of pickup with a cover that's not showing anything, or with two coils of sets of coils that are identical looking. The byproduct of having two coils, as you can imagine, is that it's louder, it's beefier, it has more output that it's going into the amp, so it distorts a little sooner or a little more easily, and it is less noisy. So you might think, wow, that sounds really good. Well, why do people still use the other kind of pickup? Well, these are great for like a single note work. Also, if you are playing like jazz music, or where generally you want like a sort of a darker, warmer sounding sound, then these are the guitars that are suited for that tend to have humbuckers in them. It's not as good. You can make it sound bright and you can make it sound good for more jangly, chordy kind of music, but it's just not quite as well suited as single coil. So there are people who like humbuckers, there are people who like single coils. There's nothing wrong with either one of them. You can use one or the other to do whatever that you want. There are all kinds of other, with electric guitars, there are all kinds of other things, factors, elements that you can introduce in the signal chain between the guitar and amp, and from amp to the sound reproduction to sort of affect the sound and tone. So you're not totally locked into a particular kind of sound just because the pickups are a certain way. But that being said, the pickup is the crucial part of the chain, in that they are the device that senses the vibration of the strings and translates it into sound that gets amplified. So having this be more suited to the kind of music that you want to play generally gets you there easier, right? So humbucker equipped guitars are used, like I said, for jazz music and for a lot of rock music where you're playing single note riffs, and when you also do a lot of leads on it. Also, it's a little easier to get sort of a big, fat, really ballsy, authoritative kind of sound out of humbucker guitars. It's easier if you play with a lot of distortion like metal, then it's easier to sort of get the distortion to sound good, to get fully distorted with these kind of pickups. So just generally speaking, anything where you're gonna do sort of a lot of, you wanting to do single note stuff, can be sort of better served with humbucker, or is easier served with humbucker equipped guitars. Well, one last thing to add about humbucker versus single coil is that some guitars come with some of each, and those guitars are obviously more versatile, right? Generally speaking, whatever the kind of music that you want to play, I assume that you probably have some artists or some bands, acts that you kind of like to sort of you like, on whose music you want to learn, and if you generally pick up the same kind of guitars as they use, obviously it'll get you a little closer to that sound. Okay, so today we looked at two different kinds of acoustic guitars, the steel string and the nylon string, and then two different kinds of electric guitar, the ones that primarily have single coil pickups and the kinds that have humbucker or dual coil pickups, and sort of talks about what kind of music will be better served with those kinds of guitars. Whichever guitar that you pick up first, obviously you can learn how to play, and you can learn to play a lot of different kinds of music with guitar. That's one of the things I love about guitar, is that it's just so versatile, and there's so many different kinds of music that you can play with it. There are some guitars that are sort of easier to get certain sounds out of than the others, but that doesn't exclude you from doing some things. Well, like, okay, so it's hard to play metal on classical guitar, but I would not say that you can't do it, right? Alright, so that's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.